Okay, let's look here at the bottom of page 151. There's a footnote on the left. Remember last week we were talking about embroidering your talitot with psukim? Are you allowed to? Are you not allowed to? What happens if it already was embroidered onto your talit? You didn't ask. Being careful not to sit on it. Such things like that we mentioned. We're going to look at the origin of why not embroider a pasuk on a talit. A talit is a holy artifact. So why can't I put a pasuk on it? Let's look inside in the left column. Mikol din zeh, the origin of this halakha. Shasur lirkom pasuk b'talit, that it's forbidden to embroider a pasuk on the talit. Embroider writing, it's not. Don't get stuck on the word embroider. B'divrei HaRambam, it's in the writings of the Rambam. I just was able in New York to get a copy of this book. B'sheilot v'tshuvot Pe'er Hador. The Rambam has a book of questions and answers called Pe'er Hador. This specific book was edited and reprinted by the same son of Rabbi Ovadia who wrote this book. It's a small black book. Umilvad hatam haniskar lemala, and aside from the reasons given above, kadav od tamim lesol. He wrote more reasons not to put a pasuk on the talit. Haychad. The first one is something you might not know, but many poskim are of the opinion that you're not allowed to write a pasuk down unless you do sirtut. Do you know what sirtut is? Ever see the Torah? What's under the words in the Torah?
Oh, yeah, like line.
The line. They scratch a line into the parchment. Most poskim say that you're not allowed to write a pasuk down on paper unless you do sirtut underneath it. That's one of the halachot of quoting pasukim. V'asur lichtov pasuk b'li sirtut. V'od, the second reason. Mipnei she'en lishtamesh b'chtav ashuri. What is ktav ashuri? Do you know? The font used, the Hebrew font used in this book, is similar to ktav ashuri. Ashuri is the font used for writing in the Torah. But essentially any block script, not cursive script, not a Rashi script, any block script is referred to as ktav ashuri. It's forbidden to use ktav ashuri el l'kitvei kodesh, only for holy purposes. So I find many people will send you a wedding invitation, and you've seen this in Israel more than here, and they ask that the Hebrew shouldn't be in block script. Actually, Mordechai Eliyahu was of the opinion that anything in Hebrew that has block script on it, you can't put in the garbage. It's a holy script. You have to put it in Geniza. I don't know what he did in Israel with everything has block script on it, but wedding invitations at least, Mordechai Eliyahu used to ask, it doesn't look as fancy, but use a different font. Because the Torah was given in this script, you can't use it. And the luchot were also written, the tablets were also written with that. וכתב שהטעם שהוא מפני שיש חשש שיבוא הפסוק לידי ביזיון. It says, in that reason which we said that we're afraid that maybe the talit is going to be used or it's going to become worn out and it will be used for something not respectful. hu nachon v'chazak. It's very strong and it's much stronger. Min hatam she'asur lichtov pasuk b'lo sirdut. It's the strongest reason of them all. Is that perhaps the pasuk might get worn out, or the talit will get worn out, and people will not dispose of the talit properly. V'chen pasak Maran b'Shulchan Aruch Yoredah. Maran writes in Shulchan Aruch later on, asur lirkom psukim b'talit. You're not allowed to embroider psukim onto a talit. V'chen pasuk donei achonim, and many of the great achonim wrote the same thing.
But I thought there's a bracha on that.
Right, well, that's what we're referring to. Essentially, these are the reasons that are given, and even though b'diavad, if it's already happened, they already have a pasuk in there, so you can leave it. You're allowed to leave it, but a person should be careful, not in the future, not to buy talitot with such a writing. There's nothing wrong with the talit. That's what I'm trying to explain. The only thing wrong is that you have to take good care of the talit. So even when you're done using the talit, you should dispose of it in a proper fashion. Okay, top of page 150. Yeah.
So what's the reason why it's so common practice today to do that?
I'm sure you can ask Dan, but he'll tell you that in the Judaica field, not everybody is a Torah scholar.
Yeah.
You have a lot of, first off, like the guys in China are definitely not Torah scholars, but you have a lot of people that, they make talitot, they make candlesticks, they make chanukiot, whatever they do. You know, they're not printing books on halakha. They just print, they put out, exactly, they don't know exactly what they're doing. And so it's already become entrenched in the Jewish people. Certain things that were done by not Torah scholars. And I'm being very nice about them. It doesn't have to be black. Actually, the most correct talit should be white with white. Actually, if you want to give the most correct talit, it's not even white and white. It's like the Bet Yosef talit. I wear one on Yom Kippur. The white is the same color as the rest of the talit. It's not a talit with white stripes. It's a talit with talit-colored stripes, if I can explain it that way. The talit's supposed to be white, according to logic, according to common sense, according to Kabbalah especially. The black stripes, which I wear on my talit, I have black stripes on my talit. It's a Yemenite talit. The Yemenites all had black stripes in their talitot. Probably, we don't really know where it comes from. The theory on the ground is that it used to be blue, to remind you of the tchelet that we used to have in the talit. And so, today that we already have tchelet back in the talitot, you probably could get rid of those black stripes, but tradition is tradition. The main thing is the talit should be mostly white. So like a red talit or a blue talit or a neon green talit. The actual fabric?
Yeah.
So it's a mistake. The talit should be white. That's the color of a talit. Now, is a talit that's blue not kosher? Of course it's kosher. Talit is any article of clothing that has four corners. But when you're asking about an ideal talit would be, again, without psukim, without certain things, and with just white as its colors.
I saw someone wearing purple one.
Okay, so you have all kinds of things.
Tie-dye.
But the correct thing is the Yemenites and the Moroccans also, and all the Ashkenazim had black stripes in their talitot. That's okay. The majority is supposed to be white, and that is in all of the talitot. The majority is white. Actually, Chabad has an interesting custom. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Ever seen how Chabadics wear the talit? They might not even know this.
It comes like
The white patch.
like almost like
Not the white patch. That was last week.
on each
They
side.
like scrunch it up
Right.
under their shoulders.
Oh, and you
It
roll
kind of
it,
looks
yeah.
like a Superman cape in the
Right,
back,
yeah.
like comes to a point.
Right.
It's
The reason they do it, yeah, it's like round on the
Yeah.
corners. The Lubavitch Rebbe was an interesting predicament. He was stuck between two great people, one being his father, and one being his father-in-law. His father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, was a big mikubal. His father-in-law was the Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe. That's why he became the Rebbe. His father was a Kabbalist who only wore a white talit, and his father-in-law was the Rebbe who wore a black striped talit. Chabad actually has their own stripes of a talit. It's the only one that has those kind of stripes.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what to like when he got married or became the Rebbe. He didn't know, should he wear a white one in respect to his father or a black one out of respect to his father-in-law. So he did both. He wore a talit with black stripes and then rolled the stripes in so you couldn't see them.
So it looked white.
And that way he had a white talit with black stripes, but you just didn't see the black stripes. Right, it was a kibbut avayim. Now, why all the rest of the Chabadniks do it, I don't know. But that was what the Rebbe, I heard at least on good faith, that was why.
Which is a problem.
Let's see the top of page 153. Jack, do you have the English Shulchan Aruch with you today?
The hay is what, 4?
5.
5.
So I'm gonna just in a second. I'm gonna ask you to make sure we're reading it
Yeah.
right. Mivarech litatef b'tzitzit. You make the blessing lihitatef to wrap up b'tzitzit in my tzitzit. Im shnayim o shlosha. If 2 or 3 people mitatfim b'talit ka'achat. They wrap up in talitot at the same time, right? It's misleading because this Hebrew could also mean that 3 people are being wrapped up in the same talit.
Single talit.
Right? That's not what it means. In parentheses, the Rama adds in perush b'pam achat. At one time, not into the same talit. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that's how they translate it. Kulam mevachim. Everybody makes a bracha. What's the question? What's the other option? Don't forget one person to make the bracha, right, and everyone else to say amen. You could do that just like kiddush, just like hamotzi. V'im ratzu, says Maran, and if they wish, echad mevarech v'acharim yanu amen. One can make the blessing, and everybody else can answer amen. Okay, let's look at the halakha bara. Od paratei dinim, more details. Binyan berkat talit, regarding the blessing on the talit. A talit gadol mevarech, you make a blessing on the big talit, b'shem u'malchut, with Hashem's name. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehitatef betzitzit. To wrap ourselves in a talit. V'yesh lomar, and one should say, betzitzit. Be, as opposed to batzitzit. Right? B'nikud shva tachat habet. You should have a shva, the two dots underneath the bet. V'en lomar batzitzit. You should not say batzitzit, b'nikud patach tachat habet, with a patach underneath the bet. Umikol makom, but in any case, b'diavad, if you already did it, im ta'a v'amar, if you're mistaken and you said batzitzit, b'nikud patach tachat habet, with a patach underneath the bet, yatzai yedei chova. You fulfilled your obligation. So, you should say litatef betzitzit, but in the case that you said batzitzit, you did fulfill the mitzvah of saying this blessing.
Are there any Sfarim that say ba, or they all say ba?
I don't know. I'm familiar only with ba, but it could be some say ba.
Why the warning? What's the specific reason? Like ba be is like wrap in.
Do you want to look? We can look at the notes. Do you want to do it?
Yeah.
Come. And the bottom of the page is Zayin, the footnote Zayin. Halevush. There was a rabbi called the Levush. Katav. He writes, "Shehaomer bepatach." Someone who says ba tzitzit, hu taud gamur. It's a complete mistake. Hen mitzad dikduk, whether in terms of Hebrew grammar, uven mitzad din, and also according to halacha. V'isbir hatam, and he explained the reason shu taut mitzad din, why it's a halachic problem. Mishum sheim yomar bepatach. If he says it with a patach, בתציצית, הרי זה מורה שכוונתו בציצית המיוחדות והמבוררות, והיינו תכלת. Here we get into some political territories. He says, you're saying that בתציצית means in the tzitzit, the best kind of tzitzit in the world. The best kind of tzitzit is the kind of tzitzit that has tchelet on it. We have a less ideal than tzitzit that we don't have a blue string on it. Or those of you who don't have. And he says, Bat tzitzit means the best tzitzit, which we don't have today, or most of us don't have. And never says a mistake. Shehi kar mitzvah tzitzit im hi benimtza. When there was tchelet, it's the best way to perform the mitzvah of tzitzit. V'im ken, and if so, bezman hazeh, nowadays, I'm reading this as a quote from the Levush. I don't agree with what I'm reading. She'en tchelet inside, that tchelet is not available. It is available, but here, in his time, it wasn't available. Hamvarech bat tzitzit, somebody who says bat tzitzit bepatach, harayzo berchat shav v'sheker. It's a lie of a blessing. And it's a blessing in vain. V'lachen omer b'shva sheperusho betzitzit kol dehu. Betzitzit means any tzitzit. I'm making a blessing on tzitzit in general. My wife would hate this. Like, why are you being so nitpicky? But, okay. Thank God she didn't write the Shulchan Aruch. Umaran Chida, and the Chida writes, B'Berkei Yosef, Katav b'Shem HaMaharam Di Lonzano. He writes the name of the Maharam Di Lonzano. Shafilu k'sheyesh tchelet, that even when you have tchelet, yesh lomar b'shva v'lo b'patach, you should still say betzitzit. Shim yomar b'patach, if you say batzitzit, have pirush batzitzit hayadua atzmo. Interesting. So when you say batzitzit, you're only referring to the strings. And you can't make a blessing just on the strings. The strings on their own are not kosher. You have to have strings with the clothing. Because you cannot wrap yourself up just in strings. And therefore, it's incorrect, even if you have tchel, to say batzitzit.
That's ridiculous, because tzitzit or tzitzit, talid.
But if you take one away from the other, it's not useful for any mitzvah.
You can't say about tzitzit and mean a talid. Talking about tzitzit.
Talit is called tzitzit. There's no blessing for the talit. Litatef betzitzit.
I know, but why not call it talid? There is a difference in
Talit just means clothing. Tzitzit is any kind of clothing that has a tzitzit. You're right. In our English, Hebrew, tzitzit are this, and the talit is what you wear at the Beit Knesset. But it's not Hebrew-wise true.
The idea of the tali, see, I understand the idea that when you say tzitzi, you say the tzitzi, it has to be plural. I mean, you have to be plural, and you can't say a tzitzi. It doesn't make sense because there's 4 of them.
Right.
So, but why it has to be a perfect tzitzi? I mean, you could say the tzitzi, just referring to.
Okay, so that's why there's another opinion.
Yeah.
Page 134. Let's turn the page. I'm skipping a few lines. 3 lines down on the right side.
154.
Yeah.
And by the way, the English just says tzitzi. It doesn't use an article.
Interesting. Okay. To wrap it up in tzitzit. Yes. Ulam habach, but the Bach, the Beit Chadash. He's an Ashkenazi commentary on the Tur. Katav al Pi HaZohar, he's also a Hasidic rabbi. He writes based on the Zohar. Shevisham. That he quotes there. Sheyesh lomar habet b'patach. You must say it batzitzit, unlike everyone else. L'horot alikar hamitzvah sheptir, specifically in order to show that the main mitzvah is the tchelet. Because yes, refer to the tchelet because that is the main mitzvah. Shal yado yiskol kol mitzvot Hashem, because the whole idea behind tchelet is to remember all the different mitzvot, and that's what you should be remembering.
How can you make a mitzvah? I mean, how can you make a bracha on something that's not there? If there's not a Kehillat there, it takes away the whole case.
Right. So he says that you're just imagining tchelet.
We don't say bracha on imaginary
Okay,
things.
that's why he's the Bach, and we don't follow his opinion. But it's a holy opinion. Just we don't agree. He also makes the argument, even according to Hebrew grammar, you have to say batzitzit. Okay, we're not done. In steps, Hagaon Ya'abetz. The Ya'abetz is Rabbi Yaakov ended. We've quoted him many times before. Uvisidoro Hizbir Atam, he explains, Shebe'ofen zed, and in this way, Moreh Patach Kehei Hayidiah. The Patach, batzitzit, refers to tzitzit that are used for a mitzvah. As opposed to, there are many other things in Hebrew called tzitzit. For example, tzitz harosh could be like the crown of your head. And so he says, when you say bad tzitzit, I mean the tzitzit that I'm using for a mitzvah, not any other thing that might be considered tzitzit.
In the Beit HaMikdash, of course, the word tzitz.
The tzitz, it's the same idea. That's that crown. Okay. And many rabbis agree with him. Ulam, but I'm skipping a few lines. There's a little nun in parentheses. Ulam. Linyan halacha, according to halacha, pashat haminhag, the custom has spread, kedat halevush, like the levush, v'achida, ushar achonim asurim shesh lomar abed b'shva. V'chatav b'sever Eretz Chaim, in the book Eretz Chaim, there's a few Eretz Chaim, so he calls it Eretz Chaim. Someone read that word to me. Saton. Ever hear the Syrian last name Satan? S-U-T-T-O-N?
Oh.
It's a Syrian last name. He wrote the big tzaddik. He wrote a book called Eretz Chaim, all the customs of the land of Israel. Sheken minhag Sfaradim b'Yerushalayim u'v'Tzfat. The Sfaradim in Jerusalem and Tzfat all say betzitzit. But he says the reason why it's okay if you say batzitzit is because obviously there are a handful of rabbis that agree that you're allowed to say batzitzit and not just betzitzit. B'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow we're going to discuss, after Speak Love Desha, we're going to discuss about the 2 or 3 people making a bracha at the same time, or wrapping themselves up, and then we'll be going into other details of the laws of tzitziot and talitot and such things. B'ezrat Hashem.